Good morning, everyone. I want to extend another warm welcome to this symposium today. And as our theme is a compassion as a path to illumination, I wanted to talk about self-compassion. While this is a beautiful time of year and we have solstice and the holidays to look forward to, it can also be stressful. So I wanted to use this opportunity to look at some different practices for self-compassion and to look at alleviating some of the suffering that people might be going through this season. My presentation is entitled Self-Compassion as a Gift to the World. So this morning, we'll take a journey through the lens of self-knowledge, drawing on some Buddhist wisdom about compassion, including insights from the Buddhist nun Pema Chodron. And then we'll take some inspiration and wisdom from the meditations of a Jesuit priest, Anthony de Mello, and his teachings on discovering our true nature. I wanted to start us out with this painting by Nicholas Roerich, and it's called Compassion. And I love this painting because it has this beautiful contrast of light and dark through the mountains. And you can also see the two figures. One is dark, one is light. And then you can see the little dog talking to the person that's in the light shade. This image speaks to me of the relationship between nature and humanity, and nature's compassion for humanity. And the individual on the right in the light clothing is showing compassion for the animal. And it looks like he's pulling an arrow out of the animal. And the individual on the far left in the dark is looking on and watching this interaction. And I love having this painting as a view into our talk today because I think it really gives a lovely summation of a view into all the different layers of compassion throughout our earthly existence. So today we're on the cusp of the winter solstice, the period of longest darkness before the light begins its return. And this solstice turning point teaches us about the contrast of darkness and light within the container that the divine has provided humanity. And today we're going to look at these contrasts within ourselves. Many times we have periods where we may question our worthiness, or we may harshly judge ourselves, and we may be our own worst critics at times. So we will talk about compassionately alleviating some of this self-criticism and giving ourselves the compassion that we may only want to reserve for others. To introduce the idea of compassion, we'll look at the Buddhist concept of Karuna. And this is the wish for all beings to be free from suffering. So I want to break down some of its components here. The first one is that it has an active component. So, for instance, this might be taking an action that moves us toward alleviating suffering. So, an example would be if someone is sick, not just feeling bad for that person or sympathizing with them, but also perhaps helping them with a Rosicrucian healing technique, or perhaps sitting with someone and intoning vowel sounds to help them feel better. Second component is that it's coupled with wisdom. And this is an understanding of something that might be truly helpful in a situation. So, an example might be a parent who gives a child everything they want, where this may cause harm to the child or to the parent. And whereas a wise approach would be to discern what truly serves the child, the parent, or the situation. The third component is that it's universal and impartial. So, compassion extends to all beings without discrimination. And this means that it could be a loved one, it could be a stranger, it could be someone who is difficult. And we may think that someone does not deserve compassion, or some other people might deserve compassion. But when we look to nature, it's a beautiful model because if we walk past a rose, the rose does not withhold its scent depending on the type of person that's walking past it. And as nature does not discriminate, this gives us the model that we should not as well. And this also means to ourselves. So, compassion leads to alleviating the suffering of others, and thus, self compassion leads to the alleviation of our own suffering. So, the complement to Karuna is a Buddhist concept called Maitri. And this is more of a self directed form of the compassion we just discussed. And this is the wish for all beings to be happy and have happiness. And Pema Chodron, in her book Comfortable with Uncertainty, draws on the teachings of her teacher and says that this involves having a loving kindness and that it involves being gentle, precise, and open. So we can think of this concept as one of loving kindness. And so she talks about gentleness being a sense of good heartedness toward ourselves. And then, secondly, precision. So being able to see clearly. And then, thirdly, openness, which means being able to let go and be open to that letting go. Now, this practice, Maitri practice, also involves playfulness. So that means getting to know ourselves and becoming more playful rather than more grim. And oftentimes, meditation associated with Maitri traditionally begins with directing loving kindness toward oneself before radiating it out toward others. Now, also drawing from Pema Chodron's teaching, Maitri specifically means unconditional friendliness toward oneself. And she says this beautiful quote, making friends with yourself means seeing everything inside you, all the layers, and not running away. And in getting to know ourselves this way, having this form of self knowledge brings us to love ourselves, which brings us to a place of self compassion. And it also reminds us of the adage we are well familiar with of know thyself. And knowing oneself this way is a practice. So it's a practice that we would want to undertake with the gentleness that she talks about, and also with a sense of flexibility and playfulness. This as opposed to undertaking this as a harsh practice, which might result in rigidity or neuroticism. So, when we look at this with flexibility and playfulness, we can also begin to examine our different layers that she talks about. But before we examine our layers, it's helpful to remind ourselves of our own essential natures. What makes us us? So, let's look at an example of this. Here, the rose is our teacher, and it's also our exemplar. Anthony de Mello, in one of his meditations, wisely says, the rose knows it is a rose. This is where nature observation is a beautiful teacher for us. The rose does not compare itself to other flowers. The rose does not apologize for its thorns. And the rose simply exists fully and completely as what it is. When we observe a rose, we don't expect it to be anything other than what it is. And we can see its beauty, we can feel its magnificence, and we can sense its essence. Take a moment to look at this rose with soft attention. We can sense the essence of the rose and begin to become aware of its nature. And using this as a model, we can help, this can help us become aware of ourselves. Another facet of knowing ourselves is knowing our true nature, sensing our essence like we would sense that of the rose. When we have this, we become aware of our essence, beauty, and our magnificence, not in an egotistical fashion, but to simply see ourselves like we would observe this quality in nature. From here, let's continue our practice and examine the layers that compose our lives, the layers that may obscure our true natures, our radiance from ourselves, and look at them compassionately. We can see our essence as our radiance and what keeps us from experiencing our radiance. In his meditations, De Mello says that these are the layers of our unexamined beliefs, ideas, habits, attachments, and fears. There might be a belief that I'm a failure, and this is one example of a belief that might be unexamined in someone. And these beliefs, ideas, habits, attachments, and fears come from culture, our history, social media, different places. But he discusses how we're weighted down with the unexamined and the unquestioned elements in our lives. And that we may need to examine these because maybe they have power over us that we don't even notice. Because we just forget about them as we go about our daily lives. And over time, these layers can have a dulling effect on us and put us into a metaphorical sleep where we forget that we have agency and we can think and act for ourselves, causing us suffering. Our compassion for ourselves becomes diminished because of all the misplaced expectations that are upon us and that we have accepted unknowingly. So, some examples here also, we've talked about, for instance, the I'm a failure example. And this can affect someone's entire life if taken at face value and repeated often. Another example, idea, is when we hold on to an idea of someone. We may end up loving the idea of that person rather than the person. Another example is, say, a habit. While we need habits to survive, maybe some habits might um, be things that we might want to really examine more closely. And we want to keep our habits to things that are mechanical, not to things like love. So we would not want to, for instance, love someone or something out of a habit. And then we would also look at an example attachment, such as attachment to needing approval, where perhaps this is something that we could examine more closely. All these can get in the way of us having clarity, and we can be covered over with disappointments, judgments, and circumstances that have happened to us throughout life. Examining these and helping to let go of these limiting patterns becomes an act of self-compassion. And you can see this beautiful painting here by Hilma af Klint. It's called Altarpiece Number 1, and it's from 1915. And I wanted to put this painting here because I think it's a beautiful representation of the potential of this awareness of all these layers that contribute to our lives. And I see the pyramid that she has here of the color palette as our palette of beliefs, ideas, and habits that we choose to help us be within our radiance. So when we examine, we can then go back and choose what we want to keep. And I love the symbolism here where she's painted the pyramidion at the top, piercing into the brightness, the radiance of the sun. So next we have the light of awareness and how this follows the examination of the beliefs, ideas, habits, and attachments and fears that don't serve us. And as I alluded to earlier, you can consciously decide which beliefs and other patterns benefit you and bring these in when you want them, when you might need them. And this can help us remember our essence. And this compassionate light does not judge, it simply illuminates. And when we have awareness, these patterns that don't serve us can begin to lose their grip on us. Again, this is a practice. And each time we let go of something that doesn't serve us, we can get another fresh start. We can see ourselves in a new light. and nurture ourselves as this newborn is being held in this beautiful painting by Georges de la Tour called The Newborn. And I love this painting here because it might also represent the lightness that we feel when some of these unexamined elements aren't present anymore and we've chosen to let go. This allows us to become more and more compassionate with ourselves and others and helps us cultivate inner peace because we are lessening our inner conflicts. And at the same time, this helps us to be more present. And when we are more present and conscious, we can see clearly. And this is demonstrated very well in this saying number 37 from the Gospel of Thomas, which says, and this is referring to Jesus and his disciples. So his disciples said, "On what day will you be revealed to us? And on what day shall we see you?" And Jesus said, "When you unclothe yourselves and are not ashamed, and take your garments and lay them beneath your feet, like the little children, and trample on them, then you will see the Son of the Living One, and you will not be afraid." Now, it may sound cryptic, but it isn't. Jesus is telling the disciples they need to strip themselves of their preconceptions, remove blinders and blocks from their view, from themselves. And with more awareness then of the resulting true nature of themselves, they will then be able to perceive him in his fullness. And this talks about overcoming some of the limiting beliefs, attachments that we've just talked about. And this saying refers to those as clothing. And when we remove that clothing, we can see clearly. Our clothing is concealing our ability to experience the true nature of ourselves, others, and to not see what's in front of us, like the disciples could not see Jesus' true nature in front of them. Without these impairments, we can see and experience more fearlessly in present time. So we can see across traditions, there's an emphasis on compassionate examination, awareness, illumination, and its relationship to living in the present and seeing clearly with compassion. So as we come to our closing meditation, I wanted to give a quick review of what we just talked about. Some practices that can help us experience the grace of self-compassion. Those, again, are unconditional friendliness towards ourselves. And this is where we undergo the compassionate process of looking at ourselves in our layers and we don't run away. The second one is having self-awareness. And this is where we place awareness on our inner selves and become aware of who we are. We can feel the divinity inside and get in touch with our master within. We begin to engage in this by getting to know our essence and to know who we are inside. And this is a practice. The third one is compassionate examination. If we choose, we can engage and examine our beliefs, ideas, habits, attachments, and fears that don't serve us. And number 4 is having an awareness and looking at this awareness as a form of illumination. And from this place of awareness, these different qualities that maybe don't serve us anymore can lose their grip. And we'll close with an exercise in self-awareness where we get in touch with our inner radiance, our essence. And I chose this painting here by Hilma af Klint. It's called The Dove, number 13, as a window into our meditation today. This painting, I think, beautifully captures the essence of the dove, which is a symbol of compassion, love, peace, gentleness, and inner light. So now we'll have a meditation of a foundational practice to connect with our essence, our inner radiance. Developing this perception of our essence allows us to be conscious of and to know what parts are you and what is not you. So I invite you to close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths, slowly letting them out. And we're going to go gently inside ourselves. And if you remember the image of the rose, you can think of that. Or you can also look at this painting, the essence of the dove. And we're going to sense ourselves like we were able to sense that rose or to sense the essence of the dove. You can put yourself in place of the rose or see yourself as the rose, as just itself. Perceive that inner part of you that is just you. Feel your inner essence, your radiance. Does it have a vibration? Perhaps a scent, a color, a sound? It might be a feeling tone. This is the you that does not change, and it's with you at all times. And experience this with gentleness and flexibility and playfulness. Sense the master within that is part of you. I invite you to come back and spend time with this exercise, experiencing your essence. And to repeat this foundational practice. You may now open your eyes and come back to objective reality. At this time of solstice, let us take the time to welcome back our own inner light. This is a time of year when we can feel heavy with expectations of how we should be in the outer world. That heaviness, perhaps of missed goals or shortcomings, can cast a darkness over our innate radiance. Life gives us many opportunities to grow, yet we often forget the wonder that we already are from birth. Let us take the time in these darkest days to shed our disappointment on our shortcomings, to celebrate and welcome who we are with the return of the light of the season. Let us practice self-compassion and bring out our own radiance through love and awareness. And may we find courage to live in our own radiance. May we know ourselves, and in that knowing, find peace. When we are at peace within ourselves, we spread that peace to the world around us. Thank you, everyone, and peace profound.